My next guest is Kelli Martin, and from her official bio and how I've got to know Kelli, I can share with you that she is a talented and respected solicitor, business leader, and social justice advocate. Based in Brisbane, Australia, she has worked predominantly in family and criminal law since being admitted in 2008, before establishing her own firm, KLM Solicitors, in 2015. She is a member of the not-for-profit Red Rose Foundation, which she has previously chaired, and actively works to end domestic and family violence. And it is within that context that I do need to let you know that some may find elements of our conversation distressing. We are about to pack much more than just one lawyer's story. We explore Kelli's commitment to social justice, her determination to ensure everyone has access to good legal advice, and why family lawyers must learn how to wrap their work up in empathy and storytelling. We discuss her own challenges with post-traumatic stress disorder, the impact of vicarious trauma, and just how the high-profile murder of a client reconfirmed her commitment to her work. It is a candid, vulnerable conversation, one that is as important as it may be triggering, and I do encourage you to reach out to any of the support organisations we have listed in the show notes. Welcome to our conversation with Kelli. So Kelli Martin, welcome to Since 1972. It's great to have you here.
Great to see you too, Jackie.
It is really good to see you, actually, with all the lockdowns we've had recently. And speaking of lockdowns and the ever-changing world, where exactly are you right now?
Very lucky to say that I'm in Brisbane in Queensland. We are recently out of our most recent lockdown, so
yep.
It's a good place to be right now.
Excellent. Excellent. So Kelli, I have got to know you a little bit over the last few years, but for the benefit of our audience, I'd just love if you could take a few minutes to talk us through what you do now and how you've got there. So just that sort of Kelli in a nutshell.
Sure. So I am the managing partner and director of a family and criminal defence law firm in Brisbane called KLM Solicitors. I started KLM back in March 2015 with me and one other support staff member working with me part-time. I started at a regional little office in Nunda, which is a suburb of Brisbane. Yep. I now have 27 staff. And 4 offices, including most recently my Brisbane CBD office, which is a half a floor of an office building in Brisbane City. So quite quick growth, incredible support from people around me. Very passionate about what I do. I have a very large focus on helping women and children in the domestic violence space as well.
Yeah.
So I'm very lucky to be involved with some good charity work as well here in Brisbane.
Yeah, absolutely. And we spoke earlier about how busy you are, but it's actually, in one way, it's gratifying to see your business grow, but the reason for the growth is something we all actually should stop and think about.
Absolutely.
So Kelli, just very quickly, how did you get from, this pathway into landing your own law firm? You were quite young when you opened it. So what was the catalyst and the lead into doing that?
Probably, to be brutally honest, not the best catalyst, but I worked for an employer for about 4.5 years. I had a rather bad breakup from that employer and no hard feelings at all there, but at the time it was a massive wake-up call to me working in the industry, and suffered quite badly with the separation from that business. And instead of going and finding another job, at the time I was in my early 30s. Mm-hmm. And at the time I couldn't think about going and working for another employer. So I looked around to find a firm that would take me as a consultant, if you'll have it that way. So I worked for myself. I built up my own file load. And I suppose I used those couple of years working for that lady's firm, who will be forever grateful for, as a bit of a stepping stone into whether or not I could launch my own business. So I did that for a couple of years. In that time, I had my first daughter as well, which was unexpected, but don't do things in halves. And then, I think when Alex, my eldest daughter now, started going to daycare and it was local to where I was like, why am I travelling to the other side of Brisbane to work in somebody else's office space doing my own thing anyway? Why don't I find something closer to home and start my own business? So that's what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very young. I think I was 32 I think I was 31 when I went out on my own, and then 32, um, nearly 33 when I started KLM. So it was
Fantastic.
a big thing to do at that time, but
Yeah.
I don't look back now and regret it. So it's a good thing.
No, so that is a big decision to make, especially in your early 30s. Although I sometimes look back at my management career at that stage and think I was a lot less risk averse than I am now. I think we make faster decisions when we're younger. Can you remember what it was that really became really important for you to establish KLM and do things the way that you wanted to do them?
Yeah, I think a lot of people in family law, not a lot, but a significant number of firms lose the focus on um, the client and what they're really there for. I have always had a mantra with KLM that we look after the client first. So we're a very family focused firm. We have a bit of a different way of doing things. Most of my clients have my mobile telephone number. Unfortunately, I've put myself on 24-hour call for my
Yeah.
entire career, but I have a very good relationship with my clients, and I've encouraged all of my staff to build that relationship as well, and a very straight shooting attitude as well. So
Yeah.
that I wanted to do some things a little bit differently in that way. I also have offered throughout my career assistance to people that are really struggling. So
Yeah.
probably one of the very few firms at my level, at my size in Southeast Queensland that still offers legal aid funding to clients. And I can tell you that's almost like working pro bono, because
Yeah.
the money that the government gives us isn't very good.
Yeah.
But I'm a firm believer in social justice and the ability to access legal advice. So I do offer legal aid. I also have most of my female solicitors here volunteer at Women's Legal Service. We
Yeah.
have a strong community focus, and we also make sure we do about one or two pro bono matters a year as well. So
Excellent. And the
yeah,
Women's Legal Service, which you touched on, I'm sure we'll touch on throughout the interview, is quite a formidable service. I think it's actually sort of best in country at the moment with the way that they support women coming out of those scenarios. So, how do you foster in your staff that permission, I guess, to actually be and build those relationships, especially in an environment where in the legal profession it's usually frowned upon, not endorsed, not encouraged? How do you give them that permission to do that like you do it?
well, I think that it's really learning from experience from working with me. So the way that I work, the way that my firm operates is there'll always be a senior and a junior lawyer on every file. So the juniors get to learn from a very early age the way that we work.
Yeah.
And the seniors that are the seniors now are people that have worked with me as juniors. So I have a really good staff retention rate, and I've surrounded myself with people in my firm that have the same, I suppose, view on how files should be run, and with that empathetic
Yeah.
background as well.
So, do you think that that is the key distinguisher or distinction that you've got to other firms, is the way that you manage the files? And we had to break that down to something more human. How would you describe the way that you do that?
Empathy is so important,
Yeah.
and being able to tell your story a little bit to the client as well, like opening up and letting them have a little piece of you so that they
Yeah.
understand why you're here, why you do what you do. So I start most of my consults with a bit of background about me. Even when I'm doing Women's Legal Service consults, I talk to clients a little bit about who I am and where I've come from.
Yeah.
I'm very, very vocal and open about the fact that I have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder in my life as well, and that it's a real thing for clients, tangible for clients to grasp hold of and connect with. Letting people know that I'm a mother, that I'm a separated mother, that
Yeah.
that I've been through my own divorce. So just being human with clients is really important, and I've really instilled that in my staff as well. I mean, there's obviously a line that you have to draw.
Absolutely.
It's very important to draw that line, but being able to give people a little snippet of what your life has been like, so that they understand that you're a human being and not just somebody that's there trying to take money from them, because I think that's what most people think lawyers are there to do. to let them know that we are humans and that we're there to help them through something that we have some experience with, whether it be I'm a mother, or whether it's I've been through a separation, or whether it's, I've worked with this other file before that's been similar, or just putting something in the client's mind to let them know that it's a real experience for them.
That it's okay.
Yeah.
When did you first realise that was going to be key to how you manage, how you do things?
I've always done it this way.
I love that.
Yeah. I think I've always, I've got a passion for helping people through really difficult times, and I think that's definitely what I was put here to do.
Yeah.
So I've never questioned since I started. So when I was at university, I didn't even study family law.
Oh, really?
I wanted to be a commercial lawyer. And it was only, I went and worked, I did a secondment in the UK and worked for a litigation firm, a commercial litigation firm, which I loved. I had a great experience in the UK doing that. And then when I came back, I was in my third year of university, and I didn't want to just keep working in restaurants to get myself through uni. I decided to try and look for a clerking job in a law firm. And the first one and the only one that I could get at that particular moment was in a family law firm.
Okay.
Ann Street, actually, next to where my office is.
Full circle.
Full circle. And I was working full-time and studying 5 subjects a semester, so it was pretty full on. But I started working in this family law firm, which I never thought I wanted to do. And I'd already missed the boat to do family law as a subject at that particular point. But I fell in love with it almost immediately. And just at the stories that people would tell me and figuring out a way that we could help them out of that situation I knew that's what I wanted to do from the minute I started. And I've diverted to trying different things to make sure that it is exactly where I want to be, very early on in my career. But I've always come back to family and criminal defence. Being that, helping people through probably some of the darkest times of their lives is, it's really rewarding. And even though you never really get a thank you, I mean, you do sometimes, but you very rarely get a thank you. Because no one ever really wins in family law. It does feel good when you can get people through and out the door and close the file and say goodbye for the last time and know that you've given them that stepping stone to move on to the next part of their life.
Yeah, and I guess in that case, because you don't get that feedback as such that most of us look for in a professional career, you really have to trust your inner voice that you've done the right thing.
Yeah, and we know by the results that we have.
Teaching
my younger staff, because I have a lot of younger staff that work for me, that just because a client doesn't say thank you or because they're getting on the phone and they're yelling at you doesn't mean that you're doing your job badly. It just means that we're working with people that are in the most difficult time of their life, and trying to teach young solicitors how to manage people's anxiety, depression, stress during that, and being able to recognize that that's what they're actually going through and not and that it's not a reflection of how they're working is quite a skill to build.
Absolutely. What do you think is key to building that skill? Where do they start to take that on?
You have to have some psychological understanding of a breakdown of a relationship, and I think I've probably got a bit of an edge on that because I've been through them myself, but understanding that when somebody walks into your office for that first consult and they're going through a separation, and it could be real, the reason they're there is usually because it's pretty tricky and they can't navigate it themselves. Understanding that they're only going to take 20% of what you tell them in that first meeting away with them because of the trauma response. They're not going to be able to take everything in, and understanding that they might call you and burst into tears on the phone, and then the next minute they're angry, and then the next minute they're fine and saying sorry, they didn't mean to respond that way. Understanding that those are all normal reactions in a separation, and in managing the client and being able to navigate giving them legal advice when they're in that particularly vulnerable state. That's you get your head around that, then you'll be a really good communicator and a good lawyer.
Yeah. Do you think your own experience with PTSD and the fact that you have had to embrace it, do you think that actually helps with the trauma-informed responses that you're trying to instill in your team?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
I know my own trauma responses, and everyone has varying degrees of different trauma responses. So I know that I will shut down and not be able, like if it's really bad, I'll shut down and not be able to talk, and I'll need to go and lie down and people not to come near me, and just to get through that particular feeling. Or other times I might work myself to the bone and have, no breaks and snap at people, and there's so many different types of trauma responses, and understanding that they're all different and what that looks like. It would be very unusual for somebody to walk into my office going through a tricky separation and not have some form of trauma response.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's an underestimated part of the separation process, isn't it? Yeah. We don't really realise what's coming at us till we're in it.
Yeah.
Actually, on that, Kelli, if it's okay, I just wanted to divert for a moment, because you did actually post quite openly on LinkedIn last week, I think it was, about the PTSD and the mental health. And it is your first experience, I think your own words were, of something going viral. Can you tell us a little bit about what you shared and why you're so grateful that you did share it and had that opportunity?
Oh, the response I've had from that post has been unbelievable, and just people messaging me and contacting me, telling them that I've really helped them has been amazing. So I think I'm up to 230,000 views this morning or something like that on that post, which is insane. I never expect, when I posted it, we're in the middle of lockdown.
Yeah.
And I lost a colleague last year to suicide in family. He's a family law judge, actually, but a colleague before he became a judge. And it's so, we glaze over it so much in our profession.
Yeah.
That we are subjected to and exposed to so much trauma. And the support, and I'm actually speaking to the Law Society this afternoon, would you believe it? They contacted me after the post to have a chat about it. But there isn't enough support for our profession. And so I was sitting there in lockdown thinking, I'm okay, because I've got this massive team of people to talk to here now. And that's the way I deal with my trauma, is to talk about it.
Yeah.
And everybody knows that this office is a really open office. We talk about everything. We talk about how we feel about it, and, make sure that we're getting it off our chest. But there's practitioners out there that are so isolated, that are working, that they're sole practitioners, or they don't feel that they can talk about it. And then the support, I think Queensland Law Society gives us 2 law care sessions a year. So 2 sessions with a psychologist for free. And I've done them before. And whilst it's very helpful, it's not enough to constantly support practitioners through what is constant exposure to vicarious trauma, particularly in family and criminal defence and domestic violence and child protection. So those 4 areas, which I happen to practice in all 4, are, I'd say, the most trauma adverse practicing law fields that there is. And we don't get any extra support in these fields. Yeah. We get the same support as everybody else gets. And it's not very well communicated to members, in my view. Yeah,
so
they do
when
mental health sessions once a year and that kind of thing, but it's not. And so that's the reason behind the post, to get back to your original question, was to reach out to other people practicing in law.
And then thinking about the insane level of response and your first viral post. So thinking about all of that, and you just said, now the Law Society's reached out to ask you to speak. What do you hope comes out of this when it obviously resonated so strongly?
I think there needs to be more support for family and criminal defence practitioners.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a specific group set up to support those areas of practice, and it needs to be different to other areas of law. Now, other lawyers might not agree with me on that. They might say, well, I'm in a really high stress job because commercial litigation is really high stress, and I'm sure that it is, and I'm not trying to downplay other people's experiences of stress. But there's stress, which we all experience in professional life, and then there's trauma exposure.
Yeah.
And the trauma exposure is that vicarious trauma exposure. It's working with people that have been raped, that have been abused, that have been physically assaulted, that have had their children assaulted, that have lost their children, that have, been exposed to 25 years of coercive control. Just that kind of exposure that family lawyers have that is different to other areas of practice. And I think that's what I'm hoping to get out of it, is some more light shone on that particular area. We have a great practitioners association in Queensland called the Family Law Practitioners Association. It'd be great for the Law Society and Flipper, which is the acronym of that group, to join forces and to try and figure out how we can have more support.
Absolutely. Because I know in previous I know in previous conversations that it really surprised you when you realised your PTSD was a result of vicarious trauma.
Yeah. So it's not like my understanding of PTSD, and I do have fairly good understanding of mental health because of the 16 years I've had working in the industry that I work in. But my understanding previously of PTSD was that it was like one exposure to one significant incident or, one significant period of your life. For example, if you're in a car accident or if you were raped or if you were assaulted or something, and that post-traumatic stress disorder arose out of that incident or that series of incidents. But to understand that I had post-traumatic stress disorder arising from constant exposure to other people's trauma was really surprising. And it's never going to go away unless I stop doing what I do. So it's about learning how to manage it. And people ask me that all the time, how do you manage it? And, I do have things that I do regularly, like I'll have trauma responses. In fact, I had one yesterday. But I've got people I can talk to. I've got ways that I can calm down, exercising, making sure that I've got things that I tell myself, recognizing when I'm starting to slip and looking after myself, not turning to just drinking too much or
the self-medication.
Yeah.
So what has been the blessing in that process with understanding and coming to grips with your own PTSD diagnosis?
Not thinking that I was crazy. I think that I thought I was crazy and really struggling to see myself as normal, I suppose. That was really hard because it really affected my previous relationship. I'm so blessed to have a tremendous relationship as a friend with my former husband and the father of my children. I'm so blessed to have that, and I wish everybody could have that, although I'd probably be out of a job if they did. But it really did affect that relationship, and I think I at that time thought that I was crazy, and I knew that it had affected previous relationships of mine in the past because I hadn't recognised what was actually going on. And thinking that I was crazy and thinking that I was never going to be normal. And so the blessing that's come out of it is recognising that this is a completely normal thing, and that I'm very lucky to have the ability to recognise what's going on with me from a mental health perspective, and that it's okay to live with mental health illnesses. I'm a high functioning person, and I can do it. So, and the other blessing is to be able to help other people that are in that position.
I was just thinking that whole "I'm actually not crazy" would be one of the greatest pieces of greatest gifts you could give to your clients a lot of the time, I would think. Especially coming out of coercive control. Yeah,
totally understanding that it's normal to feel like this. For whatever reason.
Yeah. So you mentioned, Kelli, before about you've got people around you. If we think about not just the challenges we've just spoken about, but your career, the firm you've built, the work that you do, dealing with those challenges that you've got, who do you believe it's critical to have surrounding you? Like, who do you think everyone needs to have in their inner circle?
Obviously, supportive family is really important, but not everybody has that. So you look further afield, look at other people in your industry, and whether you work in law or whether you work in banking or finance or whatever industry you work in, find people that are doing similar things to you and connect with them. I'm very lucky to have some fantastic colleagues. I had a really difficult time last year. I represented a client that was murdered, and quite publicly so, and I reached out to people that I knew had lost clients in
Yeah.
that were colleagues of mine, and those people were so helpful and
Yeah.
wonderful in helping me through the response I was having in myself, and the guilt that I was feeling, and all of those other feelings that I had that were quite natural to feel, but other people that had been through similar things. So I think always finding people that work in similar industries, forming those connections and making sure you've got people to talk to. And that's, again, going back to that post, is what I'm hoping to do for family lawyers, to have that network of people that you can reach out to and speak to, especially if you're an isolated rural sole practitioner that doesn't have
Yeah.
anyone else. Because
Yeah.
it can be so isolating and so debilitating to feel like that.
And it's that professional isolation that we actually underestimate a lot of the time, isn't it? So when you talk about, and you touched on the event last year, which happened, which the whole world actually probably knows about. So when you're hit with something like that, what we call a high impact event, what is the first thing that you do?
Oh, I because I already knew that I had that diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, I knew what was about to come. So
Yeah.
I fell apart for 24 hours. My husband now was actually working during the week in Auckland that week, and I just remember picking up the phone to him and saying, "You need to get on a plane now." I think it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon their time, so it was difficult. You had to run and get a flight and that kind of stuff. I went home, and I think speaking to people again really helped me that evening, but also the days that followed, getting out there and making sure that I was supporting her family, that I was publicly denouncing everything that had happened and speaking up. I think I spoke at a Red Rose rally for the Red Rose Foundation on the Friday after she was killed on the Wednesday. She was killed on the Wednesday, and on the 19th, and I spoke at a Red Rose rally on the Friday morning. So just getting out there and making sure that I was having my voice heard. And to be honest, the murder of Hannah and her children has inspired me to more than ever to keep doing what I'm doing.
I was going to ask you, what has been the actual impact on you at a personal level? I mean, there's obviously the impact of what Hannah and her family have gone through, but what has it meant for you? Where has it taken you as a result?
It's just given me more strength to keep doing what I'm doing. I mean, I've met people like Hannah in the past, and I will meet people like Hannah in the future, that had absolutely no recognition of the domestic violence that they were suffering, and no idea how much danger they were in. Just making sure that, like Hannah's family's doing, that there's more done to educate people that domestic violence isn't always a physical thing. That the most dangerous people are the people that try and control other people, or that do have that control. And it's not a new thing. Coercive control has been there for forever. It's looked at. It's been looked at for years, and it's covered in the Domestic and Family Violence Protection Act. It's covered as one of the forms of violence. It's not new, but for people to recognise that it doesn't always come hand in hand with physical violence is really important. And again, educating the judiciary, educating the police, educating people that are helping these people at the front line is something that's really come out of Hannah's murder. That I think has been an enormously good thing, and I think she'd be very proud of all of the work her family and friends have done to try and get that out there. She would be enormously proud, I'm sure.
It also sounds like to me, some of the premise behind this podcast is that we're actually born knowing how to get what we want. We know what our original voice is, and thinking about how it is that we go after what we want and get it. One of the things that's resonating for me at the moment is it sounds to me as though what you've realised is we actually really have to have a voice in these matters that are important to us. We can't educate without people hearing us. We can't educate without Hannah's story being told again and again. We can't we can't actually get the change that we're looking for and the things that we know are right without having a voice. Would
Yeah.
you agree with
Oh,
that?
absolutely. I think it's my catchphrase on my Facebook page. It's that I raise my voice not to shout, but to have a voice for people that can't be heard.
I love that.
That's what I do. That's my
Yeah.
job, is to make sure that I'm helping people that don't have the strength to help themselves. So being their voice, and whether it's in the court system or whether it's through my work with charity, helping people through that process and being their voice and teaching them how to have a voice is part of what I do as well. Like, I think that's the other thing that is a point of difference with me, is giving clients not just legal advice, but a little skill set on how to move forward,
Yeah.
connecting them with the right people, connecting them with the right support groups, not just leaving them alone to deal with issues of trauma and separation by themselves, making sure that I've got that supports around them.
Because that's one of the things, I believe that we have to learn how to trust our voice. And these women or men that have gone through these scenarios absolutely lose their self-trust, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are so damaged by the time they walk in my front door that it's going to take them a long time to get back to any semblance of person that they were prior to that relationship. So,
Is there anything that you've seen that is kind of you come to recognize as a starting point? You know that they're going to be able to move forward?
walking through the door is
The big one.
is the big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got clients that come and see me that don't come back for 6 months or 9 months because they're not ready, and that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
But just even walking through that front door, people should be commended for that. Leaving in the first place,
Yeah.
having the
It's,
strength to leave.
it's those smaller moments of courage, actually, isn't it?
Oh, and don't ever underestimate those small moments of courage in a separation, especially when there's people that have, men or women, that have been exposed to domestic violence. That ability to be able to finally cut ties is
Yeah.
such a tremendous act of courage and strength. Because usually there's little people involved as well, and those little people are usually the reason they've stayed in the first place. So
Yeah. So when it comes to, I mean, we've spoken, you had some very big headlines last year with Hannah's murder. When it comes to beyond the headlines, so what is the achievement that you're actually proudest of? What is the thing that you've done that you're super proud of that no one can ever take away from you?
my children,
Your children? Absolutely.
my little girls, and they're them recognizing what I do at such a young age. I've got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old,
Yeah.
and they can articulate what mummy does to help people. And
Oh,
they,
that's powerful.
yeah, and they can articulate that what is right and what is wrong. And
Yeah.
At 5 and 7, and they are the reason that I work so hard every day. And I know that I recognise that I'm doing the right thing if they can vocalise it at 5 and 7. So
Absolutely. I mean, I think, we quite often hear people say it's for my children, they're my greatest achievement. That can be a little bit superfluous, but the fact that you're actually teaching your girls through role modelling and at such a young age, they can articulate exactly what it is that mummy does.
yeah,
I
and
think
they
that's
can tell-
extraordinary, Kelli.
and they can tell other people what mummy does. I mean, it used to be that mummy would go and tell the judge how long somebody should be in jail, and then the judge would say 1 day, and then I'd say, yes, that's good. That was what my older daughter said in her kindergarten. When asked what I did in kindergarten, that was what she said. But now they understand that mummy helps people get to the next stage in their life.
Oh,
They
that's
don't
beautiful.
necessarily know that they know that I'm a lawyer. They don't necessarily know what a lawyer does,
Yeah.
aside from helping people. So that if I have to go and take a phone call and it's at 8 o'clock at night at bedtime and it's urgent, that they understand that I'm on that phone call because I'm trying to help somebody, or that the reason I had to drop into before school care at 7 o'clock in the morning is because I have to be somewhere to help somebody.
Yeah.
And that person needs help more than anybody else does at the moment, and they understand that. So they needed to understand that because it takes away so much of my time, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I love about that is your girls are seeing beyond that you're a lawyer.
Yes.
They've seen beyond the title that mummy has this new firm in the city.
Oh,
They're actually seeing the purpose of what you do.
all of that is, I mean, all of the fact that I've grown the firm to what it is now is kind of a secondary thing for me.
Yeah.
It's great. It's wonderful. And I love this beautiful office that I'm in. And that I come into every day, and it does make me proud. But what makes me more proud is the people that I've helped in the past, and the fact that my kids recognise that's what I'm doing. And that I do wake up every morning and I still want to do this every day. It's not a challenge for me to come to work. I love it. It's the purpose that the purpose that I've been given, and I don't have days where I feel like I don't want to be. I mean, there's days where I hate moments of my job, obviously.
I think you'd be inhuman if that wasn't the case.
But I don't think I've ever woken up and gone, oh, God, I don't want to go to work today. Which is a good thing, I think.
It is absolutely a good thing. So then what is Kelli Martin's superpower?
Oh, that's a tricky one. The ability to keep going even though I know that I'm struggling myself. The ability to be able to help someone get through a particularly difficult time, even though I know it's having some detrimental impact on me. Yeah. To know that I can get over that afterwards. And that I've done the right thing in pushing myself through that. So that's my superpower, is not damaging my mental health so far that I can't do it anymore.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's that awareness of boundaries and limits, isn't it?
Yes. Correct.
Yeah. And so on the flip side of that, what's your kryptonite? What's your greatest weakness?
Being over empathetic. Apparently not charging enough not charging people enough sometimes, and just taking on way too many pro bono matters.
I get the feeling that's always going to be part of you though, isn't it? It's going to be the fabric of Kelli.
So I've got this challenge between being this person that really wants to help everyone to trying to successfully navigate business. So I've got a juggling act to do. So
does that tie into, I mean, one of the questions I have is, does that tie into what your greatest lesson has been? Or would you say your greatest lesson is something else?
My greatest lesson is listening to myself. Yeah, that's been the greatest lesson, is to listen, to stop and listen to what's happening with me. That was the hardest thing I ever had to do, was to own my mental health problems, to own that I couldn't always be strong, and to own all of those things, and to listen and stop and start again if I needed to.
I think the most powerful gift we can give ourselves is the ability to listen to, it's what I'm calling our original voice.
Yeah.
It's that voice that's inside that actually tells us what we need to know.
Yeah. And it can be clouded by so many things. Like if I have an anxiety attack, or I'm having like a really particularly bad day with my trauma response, it'll cloud that completely. Like I won't be able to listen to, the voice goes away. I can't hear it anymore. And that's when the moments where you feel like giving up. But the ability to be able to push that voice through so that you can pull yourself out of that feeling of helplessness, and to come out the other side that's the biggest lesson I've learned. That's the most truly powerful thing that a person can do.
Yeah, I love that, Kelli. I really love that. I really believe that all of us need to stop long enough to learn how to, for some of us, we actually have to learn how to find where that inner voice sits.
Yeah.
And understand that it always has our best interests at heart, even when we don't want to listen. You're usually right. So yeah. So along the way, you've talked about a lot of colleagues, and you've created this incredible network, and you now want to be able to show others how to create the same. But who is the person who stands out for you, has truly believed in you, who really made a difference for you and what you were capable of?
Oh, there is a few.
Yeah.
God, there's not really one that stands out in particular. I mean, obviously, my husband and my ex-husband, both of those two people have been such a tremendous support in their own way.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I was starting to border on having a significant trauma response recently, I rang my ex-husband to speak to him about it. And he's not the greatest understander of mental health at all. He's certainly not a psychologist. But he also knows how to talk raw with me.
He knows
So,
Kelly.
yeah, he's been a tremendous support. Obviously, my team, I've got
Yeah,
some really, really people that have been here a long time that I can
great.
talk to about it.
Yeah,
And some colleagues that I've known since university and that do the same area of law, practice in the same area of law.
yeah,
So and also Betty Taylor, who's the CEO of the Red Rose Foundation, has been instrumental in helping me through some particularly rough moments. I think believe it or not, when I first heard about Hannah's death, her murder, I was in a Red Rose board meeting. I was chairing a Red Rose board meeting. And I heard about it and people were talking about it in this board meeting. I think it was like at 10:30 in the morning. And I had no idea it was my client. I had no idea I knew who the victims were. And I went back to the office and one of my staff told me. And I remember falling on the floor and the first person I called was Betty.
yeah.
She's, a tremendous support.
That's quite a surreal experience that you were actually chairing, and we'll talk about Red Rose in a moment. You're actually chairing a board meeting at the same time as hearing the discussion around who that was and not knowing that it was Hannah.
Yeah. For those listening to your podcast that don't know, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a minute, but the Red Rose Foundation is a national domestic violence charity. So the irony of me chairing a board meeting for a national domestic violence charity whilst this was being discussed and not recognising at that particular moment who that person was, but all, talking about how horrific it was and how, that's just shocking.
Yeah.
And then getting back to my office and recognising that it was my client and that,
Yeah.
I was probably one of the last people to speak to her alive. It was pretty ironic.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about Red Rose. I know that you're really heavily involved. I mean, you do a lot of community work for a lot of things, but it seems that Red Rose is the one that's really close to your heart.
Yeah, it's another person that inspires me. It's a lady by the name of Sonia Anderson, and Sonia lost a daughter to strangulation. She was murdered, I think about 11 years ago now. And I went to a morning tea for the Red Rose Foundation about 3.5 years ago where Sonia spoke, and we heard Sonia's story, and that changed me quite significantly, and I wanted to start helping Red Rose. So I did that maybe it's about 4 years ago, and I started doing that by raising money for them through fundraising through the firm. I've always done things like that. So I think we did a charity run, and we did a trivia night for them and raised money for them. So the firm organised that, and it was, that was my first ties in with Betty, and then she asked me to be on the board. Red Rose Foundation is a national domestic violence charity. We're not government funded. Well, we've had some small amounts of government funding for training purposes, but not largely government funded. So it is started in Southeast Queensland. Betty Taylor started the foundation years ago, but the focus that we've shifted into now is this prevention of non-lethal prevention education and research into non-lethal strangulation. So that's our focus now. So we're a very different charity to many in that we've got that particular focus. And what's so significant about non-lethal strangulation is that if you are strangled by a partner, you are 800 times more likely to be murdered by them. So it is a precursor to homicide, and it's a really, really significant form of domestic violence.
Wow.
So getting that education out there, doing the research that we need to do, and helping women that have been strangled is what we're trying to do. And in that respect, we're raising funds at the moment to set up Australia's, we've got the beginnings of it already started now. It's been a big year for Red Rose, but a strangulation prevention trauma centre. So
I did see that announcement, which is, and that's what really got my attention as well, because it's very targeted and specific intervention. Yeah. And I thought it was incredible without realising just now, as you said, it's actually one of the main precursors to homicide. So that is intervention on the right side of future events, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's trying to prevent homicide. And Betty sits on the death review board for the domestic violence deaths. She has done for many years. she's been instrumental in having the law, with those changes to the law to include a strangulation, standalone strangulation charge under the criminal code. She's instrumental in making changes to the law in that regard. So, you know, she's a very well-respected lady, and everyone that is on the board now have been working in the sector in some way, shape or form for some time, and I've got some great colleagues on that board. I recently stood down as chair because I've got so many different things going on in my life, but I'm still very much an active member of the board, and I'm about to head up a fundraising committee, so watch this space. Follow them on Facebook, I think
it's also, and we'll put the details in the show notes for Red Rose, I think it's also really significant. One of the things that I quite often talk to people about is you need to have a voice, absolutely, but you also need to have people like Betty who know how to change the regulatory framework, who actually can, you know, and that's one of the things that is now really getting my attention after this conversation. I liked what Red Rose was doing anyway, but the fact that there's having a voice and there's fundraising, there's both of those, you're establishing the centre, which is also extraordinary, but it's also, I believe, real change comes from not just protesting in the streets, so to speak, but having someone like Betty who understands what the legislative and regulatory framework is and what we need to do to change it. I think really drives systemic change.
And having, you know, all of those strong connections with government, both at a state and federal, local, state and federal level, to make sure that we're actually implementing change.
Yeah, absolutely.
And having a say on behalf of victims. That's really important. Yeah.
Kelli, I could actually talk to you forever, and I think we always run into this when we have a conversation. I really would like to thank you, before we go into just a quick few rapid fire questions, but I'd like to thank you straight up for being so open and so vulnerable. It is a really challenging part of our community. And we need people like you helping people like all of us who at some point found ourselves in one of these scenarios and having to be able to get out. So just to wrap up, I just wanted to go into some maybe a little bit lighter questions, but a few rapid fire questions as we wrap up. So the first one is going to be, and as you know, my whole driver is I actually believe that we need to teach people how to be resilient in advance of when they need to be resilient and how to trust their inner voice. So complete the sentence for me. Resilience is
getting out of bed in the morning even when you feel as though you can't, and remembering what you're here to do.
I love that, being pulled through by something greater. Absolutely. So I get to choose one skill or piece of knowledge to build on for my future success. What would you tell me to pursue?
Wow, knowing you, I don't know.
Or maybe if you're talking to your staff.
I'm going to go back to everything that I've been speaking about during this podcast, but working on your mental health, work on looking after you, listening to yourself.
Yeah, I believe greatly. So that resonates, and it's a never-ending piece of work for me, because I think unless we get up close and personal with who we are, the shadows will always win.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So now this next question I'm going to skip over, because it was, if you have 12 months and unlimited time and resources, which charity would you support? And I think that's hands down Red Rose. And as I said, for everyone listening, we will put the details in the show notes.
Yep.
The next question is, I'm going to go your favourite book or podcast series, and what do you love about it?
My favourite book, The Family Law Act? No, I'm trying to read books. I honestly don't get time to read. What was the last book that I...
What about podcasts?
I don't listen to podcasts. I honestly don't have time. The best book that I reckon I've ever read, I can't even remember the last book I read.
I love this, because this is a woman possessed and obsessed with what she does.
All I read are like family law cases.
But I do understand. I mean, I haven't had a lifetime conviction of it, but for a while I was an industrial relations consultant, and I literally 24/7 read precedents, case law, because in industrial relations, every time a judge makes a decision, it changes the interpretation of the law, which is the same. And so,
the last book that I read, it was awful was Malat. So it's about
Sorry, I shouldn't be laughing. That's what I just said. You're obsessed and possessed.
Because I knew all of these people that were in it. Like, I knew his barrister is now the Chief Justice of Queensland, and like just
yeah.
And so, that was just I love true crime. I love true crime, and I love true crime because I work in it, and I find it really interesting, which is probably a good thing.
I think it's great. My daughter is studying psychology at the moment. She works. She actually works in Queensland Corrective Services in a prison, and she wants to do forensic psychology. And she said to me, "Mum, I'm a little bit worried because it's like all my spare time is on podcasts about psychology and forensics and crime, and I'm watching documentaries on Netflix about it. Like I don't seem to do anything but that." And I'm like, "That's actually a good thing, sweetheart. It means you're on the right path." So I do.
And the Ted Bundy movie. I love that documentary that I think that came out recently about.
So listeners, we now have
given myself time to actually watch or read are things that are just like real true crime serial killer stuff. So
they're fast. I mean, my favorite series on Netflix or whatever it was, I think, still is Mindhunters, which is the origination of studying the serial killers with the FBI. So I kind of maybe get it.
I like musicals though, Jackie. Like I've watched Hamilton about 500 times.
It's so good.
They're the kind of things that I really love musicals. I've got a strong musical background. I still play piano and I still love music. So
it's actually one of the things and musicals is one of the things I'm really missing with the current world. It's like
I saw Hamilton on the last weekend of Sydney before Sydney went into lockdown.
Oh, that was so fortunate. We actually didn't quite get time to see Hamilton in New York just before lockdown, and now it's like, it's one of those things. Yeah. But anyway, we're going to wrap out with the best piece of advice you have for anyone listening when it comes to going after what you want.
Never ever let anybody tell you can't do it.
I love that.
Yeah, just do it. Just do it.
Just do it.
Don't think about it. Just do it.
I love that. And on that, I think that's a mic drop moment and we can close. Thank you so much for your time today, Kelli.
Thanks, Jackie.